No! Jessica cried in dismay as she wrangled her keys from the pocket of her fashionably too tight jeans. An apple tumbled out of the paper grocery bag she was struggling to balance on her hip and rolled away down the hallway. It came to rest on the welcome mat of her worst neighbor, a middle aged man who seemed capable of detecting the tiniest noise, then promptly complaining about it. In fact, since she moved into the apartment 6 months ago, leaving behind the dorm room she and Charlie had shared, she had come to her door 3 times to complain about her radio. Twice it had not even been on. Mostly, he just glared at her whenever they passed in the hall. Jessica didn't really mind the hostility. It was a little like being back at home in New York. She left the apple where it was. Having managed to get the door open, Jessica dropped the bags on the kitchen counter and looked around the room with a quiet satisfaction. The apartment wasn't very fancy, but it was hers. When she first moved in, she had gone on a clean rampage, scoring out the baked in dirt that must have been lining the baseboards since the building went up some 50 years ago. It had taken almost 2 weeks of nothing but scrubbing between classes and homework, and she went to bed every night with sore arms, as though she'd done nothing but weight training. But now the apartment was clean enough for Jessica, albeit just barely, which is no small bar to clear. She began tucking things out of grocery bags, lining everything up on the counter before putting each item away. Peanut butter, bread, milk, bananas, and she muttered to herself, then fell silent. Something was wrong. She looked around the room carefully, but there was no one there, and everything seemed to be where she last left it. She returned to the grocery bags. As she closed the refrigerator door, the hair at the back of her neck prickled. Jessica whirled around as though expecting to catch a burglar in the act. Her heart jolting with adrenaline, but the room was still. Just to be sure, she went to check the door. It was locked, as expected. She stood in silence for a moment, listening to the distant sound of her apartment complex, the hum of an air conditioning unit. A leaf blower across the street, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She stepped carefully back to the counter and finished putting away the groceries, then headed to her bedroom. She turned the corner to the hallway and screamed. A figure stood in the dark, blocking the way. Jessica, said a familiar voice, and Jessica reached hastily for the light switch, tense to run. The light flickered on slowly. It was Charlie. Did I scare you? Charlie said uncertainly. Sorry, the door was unlocked. I should have waited outside. She added, looking down at her shoes. I just figured since we used to be roomies anyway. Charlie, you scared me to death, Jessica said in a mock scolding tone. What are you doing here? I told you I'm having dinner with John, Charlie said, and Jessica nodded. Could I borrow something to wear? Maybe you could help me pick something out? Charlie looked hesitant, like she was asking an immense favor, and Jessica gave her a puzzled frown. Yeah, sure, of course. Jessica tried to calm herself. But, Charlie, it's not like you need my help choosing an outfit these days. Jessica gestured at Charlie's clothing. She was wearing her habitual combat boots, or a more elegant version of them, but she had paired them with a medium length black shirt and a dark red scoop necked blouse. Charlie shrugged and shifted her feet. I just think he might like me better if you help me pick an outfit instead of me dressing myself. John doesn't seem to like my new look. Well, Charlie, Jessica stopped, choosing her words carefully. I won't do either of you any good to pretend nothing has changed, she said firmly. Wear what you have fun. You look great. You think so? Charlie said, looking doubtfully. Yeah, Jessica said. She brushed past Charlie to go into her room, stepping cautiously past her, and Charlie followed, pausing in the doorway like a vampire waiting for an invitation. Jessica looked at Charlie and was suddenly set at ease, as if their friendship had never been interrupted. Jessica grinned. So, I mean, are you nervous? She asked. going into her dresser for her hairbrush, and Charlie came in and sat down on the bed. I feel like I have to prove something to him, but I'm not sure what, she said, tracing the flower design on Jessica's bedspread. You were right, by the way. Jessica turned around, brushing her hair absently. He wants to see you tonight. I think that's a great start, she offered. Just let him spend some time with you. He's been through a lot. Remember, from his perspective, he saw you die right in front of his eyes. Charlie laughed, a soft, forced sound that was silent. I'm just worried about him, and I can't even help him. Because she broke off. Jessica, do you remember him telling me something important that night? Something, and her tone changed. It was subtle, a hint of a strain. Jessica kept her expression neutral, pretending not to notice. Something important? Jessica asked. Something. What I will remember. Should remember. She kept her eyes on the bedspread, still tracing the pattern like she was trying to mesmerize it. Jessica hesitated. She could still see it all, as vivid as the present, though it gave her a sick feeling in the pit of her stomach. Charlie was trapped in the twisted, broken Freddy suit, with just her arm free. John was holding her hand. Jessica shuddered. That terrible, singular crunching sound echoed in her head. Jessica? Charlie asked, and Jessica nodded briskly. Sorry, she cleared her throat. I don't know you and John are alone together for a few minutes. I'm not sure what he said. Why? I think it's important to him that I remember, Charlie said, back to chasing the bedspread. Jessica watched her for a moment, suddenly ill at ease in her own bedroom, as if sensing it. Charlie stood and met her eyes. Thanks, Jessica, she said. Sorry again for breaking in. I mean, I didn't break in. The door was unlocked, but you know what I mean. No problem. Just announce yourself sooner next time. Jessica smiled, feeling a rush of warmth for her friend. She hugged Charlie goodbye at the door. Charlie walked a few steps and picked the apple off of the ground, then handed it back to Jessica. I think this belongs to you, Charlie smiled, then turned to walk away. When she had closed the door, Jessica sighed. The anxiety that had risen while Charlie was in her room not had abated. She leaned against the door, replaying what had just happened. Why would John want Charlie to remember the last night he said to her? She tossed the apple a few inches into the air, then let it fall back into her hand. He's testing her, Jessica said to the empty apartment. Outside Jessica's building, Charlie stepped out in the parking lot frustrated. Why did he say that was so important? She walked across the big pavement to her car. Charlie climbed into her car, slamming the door shut with more force than she needed to. She stared penitently at the steering wheel. They're lying to me, she thought. I feel like a little kid with all the grown-ups keeping secrets from me, deciding for me what I should and shouldn't know. She glanced at her watch. The clock on the car was either an hour ahead or an hour behind, and she could never remember which. She had about 20 minutes before she had to meet John. I can't show up early, she said plainly, and he really won't believe it's me. Trying to shrug off her bad mood. Shirley put the car in gear and pulled out of the lot. When she got out to the restaurant, she could see John through the window, see at the same table they had sat at last time, all the way in the back. He was staring into space as if he were deep in thought or completely zoned out. She followed the hostess to his table, and it was only when she was standing right beside him that he seemed to realize she was there. When he did, he stood hastily. Charlie started to move toward him, but he sat back down and she quickly sidestepped and did the same. Hi, she said with an awkward smile. Hi, Charlie, he said quietly, then he grinned suddenly. You're dressed a lot nicer than last time we were here. It probably just seems that way because I'm not covered in dirt and blood this time, Charlie said lightly. Right, he laughed, but there was a quick instant of appraisal in his eyes. That was a test. The thought sent something cold through the pit of her stomach. She had known it would happen, but knowing it did not make it easier to have his eyes, usually so warm, look at her with calculation. What was that movie we saw? John asked, seeming to fumble at an answer. Last time I visited, we went to the theater down the street, didn't we? It's on the tip of my tongue. Zombies versus zombies, Charlie said. Right, I knew it was about zombies, John said thoughtfully. So, what have you been doing since then? Charlie asked, attempting to shift the topic. Are you still doing construction work? Yeah, John said, then cast his eyes down the table. Actually, maybe not. I just got fired. Oh, Charlie said, I'm sorry. He nodded. Yeah, I mean, it was my fault. I showed up late and there was some other stuff, but I really liked the job. Well, it was a job at least. There have to be other building sites, Charlie said. Yeah, I guess. He looked at her stretchily, and she looked back, trying not to shrink under scrutiny. Believe me, she said silently. What will it take for you to believe me? I've missed this, she said instead. He nodded, his eyes softening for a moment. Me too, he said quietly, though she knew it was only half true. You know, I didn't leave because of. It wasn't because of you, Charlie said. I'm sorry if it doesn't seem like it was. I just had to get away from everything and everyone. Are you folks ready to order? The waitress asked brightly. John straightened his posture and cleared his throat. Charlie looked down at the menu, glad of the interruption, but excuse me. The pictures of food looked strange, as if she had heard food described, but never seen any. Miss, the waitress was looking at her exponentially. I'll have the same, Charlie said quickly, and shut the menu. The young woman frowned confusedly. Okay, I guess I should order then. John laughed. Anything will be fine. Charlie sat patiently. I'm sorry, I'll be right back. She got up from the table hesitantly and headed for the bathroom, leaving John to take care of things. Walking into the bathroom, she was struck with a jarring sense of deja vu. I've been here before, trapped in the box. I was trapped in the box. Charlie slammed the door shut and locked it. I'm not trapped. She ran her fingers through her hair, though it really didn't seem need adjusting, and washing her hands, she was just killing time, stealing a moment away from John's scrutiny. Every time he gave her that level, untrusted look, she felt exposed. I am Charlie, she said to her reflection, smoothing down her hair again nervously. I don't have to convince him that I'm me. The words sounding thin in the small room. Who else would I be? Charlie washed her hands again, straightening her shoulders, and went back out into the dining room. She sat down and put her paper napkin in her lap. Then looked John squarely in the eye. I still don't remember, she said abruptly, seized by an abstinent recklessness. John raised his eyebrows. What? I don't remember what you said to me that night. I know it's important to you. I think maybe it's why you think what you think about me. But I just don't remember. I can't change that. Okay, he set his hands up the edge of the table and let them rest on his lap. I know that. A lot happened that night, I know. He sighed for a moment, but then smiled almost reassuringly. Charlie bit her lip. If it's that important, why can't you just tell me? She asked gently. Instantly, she could see that it was the wrong thing to say. John's features hardened. He drew back from the table slightly. She looked down at the napkin on her lap. She had been straightening the corner of it without noticing. Never mind, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, letting several long minutes pass. Forget I said anything. She looked up, but John didn't respond. Excuse me for just a minute. I'll be right back. He got up and left the table. She stared at his empty chair. The waitress approached and cleared her throat. Charlie heard her, but did not move. She wasn't sure she could move. This is going horribly. Maybe I'll just sit here forever. I'll be a statue of myself. A monument to Charlie that was, Charlie that will never be again. Miss, The waitress sounded concerned, and it was enough for Charlie to, with Herculean effort, turn her head. Is everything all right, miss? The waitress asked, and it took Charlie another long moment to comprehend the question. Yes, she said at last. Could I have another napkin? She held out the first, half shredded as evidence of her need, and the waitress went away. Charlie turned back to John's empty chair. John slipped back into view and sat down, breaking the line of her vacant stare. Everything okay? He asked. She nodded. The waitress is getting me another napkin. Charlie gestured vaguely to the direction the waitress had gone. Right. He opened his mouth to go on, but before he could speak, the waitress returned, carrying Charlie's napkin along with her food. They were both silent as she placed it in front of them, and John smiled at her. Thanks, he said. Charlie stared at her plate. It was some kind of pasta. She took her fork carefully but didn't start to eat. Can I ask you something? John finally said, and she nodded eagerly, setting the fork back down. He took a deep breath. That night, did you survive? There was so much blood. He stopped at last for words. Charlie looked at him, at the familiar face that had somehow turned against her. She had been trying to piece together a story for him, but now she just spoke. I don't know, she said. There's time missing. When I try to think about it in my mind, it flinches away. Like it's, it's hit something sharp. The distance in John's eyes faded a little as she spoke. I've been in a sleep before, she went on. I think I must have figured out how to get away somehow, or at least how to position myself. She looked anxiously at him, and his gaze sharpened. I still don't understand. How did you manage to get away, undamaged? He looked her up and down again, seeming to examine her. Charlie's breath caught her in her throat, and she turned away from him, staring fixedly out the window at the parking lot. I didn't, she said tightly. John didn't answer, searching Charlie's half-turned face for a spark of something he could recognize or not recognize. She was saying all the right things in all the right ways, and her hints, more than hints, at the unshakable trauma she had gone through that night made his stomach clench. As she gazed off into the middle distance, her jaw was clenched. She looked like she was fighting something off, and John was seized with a sudden urge to go to her, to hold out his hand and offer his help. Instead, he picked up his fork and began to eat, looking down at his plate instead of at her. She knows what I'm doing, he thought, chewing grimly. She's given me the right answers. Some detective I've turned out to be. John took another bite and stole a glance at her. She was still looking off at the parking lot. He swallowed and cleared his throat. Before he could speak, Charlie turned back to him. After that night, I had to get away, she said. Her voice was hoarse and her face was strained, her features seeming harsher than before. I have to leave everything behind, John. Everything. My whole life had been haunted by what happened here, and the last couple of years, even before that, too. It's just been my whole life. She met his eyes briefly and then looked away, blinking rapidly like she was holding back tears. I wanted to be somebody different. I had to, or I go insane. I know it's a cliche to think you can change your life if you change your hair and your clothes. She gave an ironic half smile and flipped her long hair over her shoulders. But I couldn't be your Charlie forever. That naive little girl, scared of her own shadow, living in a shadow. Honestly, I don't even know what you saw in that girl. Selfish, scatterbrained, pathetic. She said the last word so constantly that she almost shook with it. A severed look coming over her face as if loathing for her past self had overwhelmed her. I never thought you were any of those things, John said quietly and looked down. He laid his fork along the rim of his plate and, not knowing what to say, he made himself look up. Charlie's face had softened and now she seemed anxious. But it's still me. She shrugged, her voice breaking. He couldn't answer her. He didn't know where to start. Charlie bit her lip. You still think it, don't you? She said after a moment. John shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unashamed. But Charlie pressed on. John, please, I don't understand if you think I'm not me. Then what do you think? Who can you possibly think I am? She looked utterly bewildered, and John felt himself wavering. I think he gestured graspingly at the air, catching nothing. Charlie, what I saw, he exclaimed, then stopped short, remembering they were in public. He glanced around, but no one was looking at them. The restaurant was not busy, but everyone there was occupied. The guests talking to the people they came with, the staff talking among themselves. I saw you die, he said, lowering his voice. When you walked into that diner the next day, Charlie, I want to believe it was true. I still want to believe it, but I I saw you die. He finished helplessly. Charlie shook her head slowly. I'm telling you that I'm alive. How can you not be how can that not be enough? If you want to believe me, why don't you? The pain in her voice sent a pang of guilt through him, but he met her eyes calmly. Because I rather know the truth than believe something just because it will make me happy.